Hello and welcome to another episode of The Business of the Starving Artist with Hayden Woods, where it's my business to get you from being a starving artist to at least a surviving artist. Everything that I've done has mostly been as a music teacher, musician, so we take a lot of this with a grain of salt, although we can apply it to other areas. Today's episode, I have decided at the last minute that we are going to be doing this discussion just because some things have come up that we're looking to see what we can make happen. For those that are visual, you can kind of see what's going on in the top corner, but I'm going to give us a more detailed idea of the world of housing. To give some backstory onto where we've been, I've been living in the same rental for we're on our almost 10th year here where I live. And I mean, roommates have come and gone, a lot of career changes have happened, and we have decided that we're going to attempt to start looking for a place. Now, for the purpose of a self-employed person, there are a lot more hoops that we kind of have to jump through in order to show what it is that we have done. So up on the screen is a email that I received from one of the folks that I was given recommendation to as a lender, because obviously we need to get approved for an amount. I won't say how much right now, but it's definitely one where it's going to be close, and it's either we're going to get it and we can try finding something, or we're not going to get it and we'll just keep doing what we're doing. Some of this has to do with my girlfriend's income, because I definitely would not be able to do this on my own. And this is something that we want to do together. So the things that they list that we need in order to pre-qualify are her 30 days of recent pay stubs, so basically like the last two pay periods to kind of get an average out, and then her 2 tax returns. That part's easy. My part is going to be much more difficult because of the nature of my work. They require a 2022 tax return. They would technically need a 2023 one, but we have yet to file because I'm waiting for investment stuff. So we are going to use a profit and loss breakdown for now, and then provide the tax return once it's completed. 2 months from most recent bank statements, which there are a lot of them that I have to look over. So we'll see what happens. But my biggest issue is going to be this profit and loss. Because when you're applying for a place, they're looking at how much you're making after, like, your taxes. In self-employment's case, we usually take a number of deductions from our business in order to lower how much we make in a year, which can be beneficial in some ways. But in terms of buying a home, this is where we start to see in my opinion, it's a flaw in the system for self-employed and trying to get a mortgage. But if we think back to the 2008 housing crisis, where many individuals had loans that they couldn't pay on, we can kind of see why these rules were put in place. So I have to show a reasonable income that we can use to make this work. And unfortunately for my 2022 tax returns, I took a lot of those deductions, I took all of the ones that I could, which meant I showed only making, after expenses and taxes, about $9,700. But with the in-house office and the mileage on the car and equipment and supplies, We could try to add some of that back in to get closer to the around 30 grand that I'm pretty sure was how much I grossed in that year. This year, I think I grossed 28 just because there were some adjustments. And I'm also only working this job. I wasn't substitute teaching at that point. So we have to kind of consider what it is that we need to do. So on this next slide, I put together kind of what our budget looks like. And from the most current budget, which is this one on the left side, this shows how much roughly that we would make each month and then all the expenses. Right now, our rent and utilities are not as bad just because of having been here for almost 10 years. Everywhere else, we're starting to see some of the prices that are in the later section, which if we were to get this mortgage, we would have to kind of accommodate for. As you can see, right now, each of us pays about $800 each towards this rent. But if we decide that we're going to end up moving into a place, this would be kind of our two budgets, either $2,400 a month for a mortgage or $2,600, kind of in that ballpark, which means we're each spending $1,200 to $1,300. That's still not terrible, but I mean, depending on, again, you can kind of see how much is left after everything is done. I have a lot more expenses in like investing and life insurance and all that. Some of the other stuff like that is already taken out of her checks before getting paid, so that's kind of why I left those blank. But this is a bare bones situation, and a lot of lenders won't use this as the way to determine how much we can afford. So you have to ask yourself, and this is what I'm having to ask myself: am I going to take any deductions this year, or am I going to just show all of that income, pay the tax on it, and show that higher income so that we can have a better shot at qualifying? And the answer is mixed, because in discussing this with the lender that I was able to talk to in more depth, there's a couple things that we can do to kind of help the situation. We're going to work towards whatever my income is. We're going to show in the profit and loss. We're going to try to add back in my home office deduction, which takes a significant chunk out, and get the mileage back in there, because that's a huge deduction. And actually, so in my house, in my area, or at least this is what we do in the US, we can take a deduction based on the amount of square footage that we use for business purposes only. Now, thankfully, I have a dedicated room for this, but in the past, that was not the case. In the past, it was did everything out of my bedroom. So if I did that, I would have to dedicate a space in that bedroom specifically for business. Couldn't use it for anything else, which made it more difficult to try to see how this would work. But now that I have this office, and even in the next house, we would have that office, we would see how much we can deduct from it. Now, I haven't totally gone all the way through this yet, but I'll just kind of show you together what we have done or what I've done in the past. Again, this is something you would have to talk to somebody about. So in total, we spent $17,600 in rent. As an example, let's say that we measured out the house and measured out the office. Again, I'm going to give different numbers from what I actually use. And let's say I only use 10% of my office, or 10% of the house for the office, rather. That would entitle about a $1,760 deduction. So If you use more of your office or more of the space in your house, if you use 20%, you could double that easily to almost $3,600, and so on and so on. But you would have to know your square footage of the whole house and then the square footage of the particular room you're in. So let's use 20% right now since it's up, and we can see why this would be difficult. Now imagine I only have my office for my music, but imagine somebody who's using their office space for something that takes up a lot more room, like painting and art. Or if I've seen the videos of the people who just have their spinning canvas and they throw the bucket full of paint. Now imagine how much space that takes up. And you can see that that would add up very quickly if you're either running a home office. If you have a regular office, then it all gets written off. But if you're using a home office, this is what we have to do. So for, let's say, 20% for right now, we can take that 3,520, and that's just the rent side, because then you also get to take the power. Again, if I'm going to throw out 1,500 times 0.2, that's about $300. Your internet kind of goes under communications more so than under the house itself. And then depending on the place you live, water, trash, sewer, stuff like that. So you could rack up, depending on how much house you use, you could rack up a significant amount for your in-home deduction, which would allow, if I were to apply that back, I'd be able to show that, yes, I do make more than almost 10 grand. That's part of a growing business, but also that gives us the chance to then see what we could more realistically go for. This is why we have to just kind of be prepared for anything. We have to be prepared to make the hard decision of, do I take these deductions or not? And again, in my case, I think my current plan is I would take the home office deduction and the mileage deduction still, because we had discussed this with the lender. But then probably for the rest of it, I might not. And I might just eat that cost, whatever's remaining, so that we can show a good amount. Now, again, my 2022 makes it much less palatable, but I think we can get on track to maybe a point where we can get a cosigner. And again, if we can get it within this budget, we can make it work. The other side of this is, now that expenses have gone up, because buying a house incurs a lot of extra expenses. It's not just the mortgage. So I'm missing some things here, like property tax, an HOA if they have one. Luckily, the place that we looked at doesn't, and that's kind of that's a big selling point for me. And then there's things like maintenance and whatnot, so you'd have to kind of start allocating for that. As you can see on mine, as we get more expensive, I start to run out of excess funds. I still have some, which is fine, and you can see that a lot of it's going towards other things. Maybe what I would do instead is I normally would invest with my IRA, and then I also have a separate account. Maybe I pause putting money into the separate account and just let the IRA do its thing for a while, so that we can kind of settle into this new routine and build up savings again. Now, tax season is upon us, so at some point we will walk through with a lot of extra censoring of the screen and just kind of describe the process. It might actually be something where we do where we just have a camera and that's all you get to see is my ridiculous face. So we're going to see what happens. I still have to wait for some things to come in, but this is kind of this is what's happening in my life right now. It's a good step. It's a great step forward from where I've come from, which is not a great place mentally, obviously, as we discussed way back towards the beginning. So if you are buying a house or thinking about it, you have to start considering a lot of these things now, or at least sooner rather than later, because I mean, we have the likelihood that we might not get what we want for the place, for the one that we looked at. And I mean, I'd be surprised if it was still up by the time we got approved, because it's shockingly affordable for what it is. I think it's just because it's an older building, but to me that also tells me that it was probably at least built a little more sturdy. We'll see. But yeah, just consider what it is that you're going to have to do to adjust and change. I'm probably going to have to pay taxes more so than I have in the past, just because I need to show a real income this year. And I mean, if it doesn't work out this year, maybe we hold off for a year and I have another round of good income, so that we can be like, okay, here's 2 years of solid 30 to 40,000 a year, fingers crossed, that we can use to make this happen. So with all of that said, thank you for indulging me on this last minute change of the business starving artist. We're going to get on track. This is the step to take to get back on track. If you like these episodes, or even just tolerate it for a little bit of your time, I would greatly appreciate sharing it around, finding new topics that we can discuss, or things that we can follow up on, that either maybe something didn't get answered, or maybe something that I said wasn't quite correct and we need to fix it. Either way, any kind of engagement would help us out a lot. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time.